I'm Matt Reynolds, and this is my podcast.
I can do the job, but running the business is quite difficult. What a lot of tradesmen lack, and I was probably one of them, is business skills.
I don't mind making mistakes. You learn from your mistakes.
Information is all around you in the minds of people that work beside you.
Peter Irvine joined me, Matt Reynolds, on Trench Talk this week to discuss his career, which has included being on the marketing team that first brought the restaurant chain McDonald's to Australia and even bigger, establishing the Gloria Jean's coffee franchise, also in Australia, before then purchasing, along with his business partner Nabib Saleth, the international master franchise brand and supply and roasting rights for all countries. The idea of these discussions, for those of you joining us for the first time, is to go into the trenches of achievement and talk not with people who are orchestrating from some lofty perspective, but to those high performers who are actually in the trenches honing their craft. That has included guests from the worlds of business, sport and entertainment, all of whom are on the front lines doing amazing things. We discussed Peter's business journey, which began at the young age of just 14, his thoughts on educating and helping his own children, and selling his stake in the Gloria Jean's operation. Today, Peter is a regular speaker at a wide range of business, community and industry events, both in Australia and overseas. He has authored the books Win in Business, 20 Keys to Catapult You Towards Your Vision, and more recently, Building Your Business, Your People, Your Life. He's also produced a range of business training tools, which you can find, along with his books, at his website, peterirvine.com. Enjoy my chat with Peter Irvine. Peter Irvine, thanks for doing this.
I'm happy to be here, Matt.
Now, we're both here, but we're not together today because you're actually in your home office in New South Wales, is where you're based.
Correct.
I'm in my office here in Melbourne, so we're doing this over Skype. Now, given your business record, I kind of feel like I should just zip my lips for the next hour or so and just have you talk, because what you've achieved is quite a lot, which we're going to jump into. But on the work front, what have you spent the last 6 to 12 months on?
Well, the last 6 to 12 months, and probably 2 years, I'm primarily 90% of the time now speaking for companies, the business groups. I do a lot of countries around the world and in Australia. A lot of business people that are connected to churches. A lot of churches want to help their business people, not just speaking at a breakfast or a lunch or dinner, but also running practical workshops, in marketing. How do you build a championship team? How do you balance family, work life? How do you build an actionable plan? So that probably takes, 90% of the time, and I've got a small number of people I've helped, if you like, consulting or mentoring now, but the speaking and travel with that takes up quite a lot of time, and also the preparation that goes with it.
Of course, you talk a lot about family, and one of the things you actually suggest a few times that I've heard you speak, and indeed in your books, is to involve your family in your business. Why do you give that advice?
Well, very simply, I've seen it both in my advertising agency days and the time when we started and ran Gloria Jean's with families, with franchisees, and even in the company itself and with companies I've helped, that if the relationship at home isn't going very well, it tends to be dragged into the business arena, and it affects how you relate to your staff, your customers, and it actually affects your business. If the business is struggling, or you've got cash flow issues or clients or staff issues, and you bring that home, it starts to affect the home life. So your whole life starts to become terrible, I guess, and you think, do I really want to be doing this? And you want to give up and close, go away, do something else. But the problem is you take the problem with you. Yeah,
yes.
I say to people, when you point the finger at someone, have a look and see the other three fingers are pointing back at you.
Oh, there you go.
And often it could be us, and it might be an attitude we need to change. So I say, if you go home and all you're doing is dumping onto the family the problems with the business, with the customers, with staff, and they never hear the good things, they start to resent the business, they start to resent where you work, they start to resent the people you work for. And it's not always like that. It's just a perspective you've given them.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because for some reason we do all have this ability to save the worst parts for those that are closest to us, right?
Yeah, correct.
What are your thoughts on, do you have children yourself?
Yes, well, they're both growing up. One's 41 and the other's 39.
Have you thought about how you actually transfer what you've learned in a business sense onto them, just sticking with this family theme for a minute?
Well, I mean, these days, to say it less than what it would have been when they were growing up is probably true, but, you know, they still talk about what they're doing, and sometimes you can bring a different perspective to something they may be confronting or an idea they could pursue with their business, or different times working for an organisation, and they've found that helpful to have, or I can introduce them to someone who can actually help them with that particular issue. But in their life and growing up, you know, you've got to develop a good relationship with your kids, because in the end they often listen to other people rather than you.
That's, yeah, true.
And you can bring someone else into their life and they'll take every word as gospel and they think, oh man, what does he know? And, you know, and that's understandable, and you sort of accept that. But that wasn't necessarily with my kids. Yes, they probably listened to other people, but, you know, when I imparted something or shared something or talked about something, I tried not to be a lecturer, but just shared, you know, hey, this happened, or this is the way I dealt with something like that. It might be helpful to you. And you never know whether it's getting through or not, but it's interesting in later years you see them do something and you think, you know, they did take that in because you can see it coming out.
Did you ever actively involve them in the businesses that you're building? Like, as in, do they have a role in the business?
Well, in the advertising agencies days, no, because they were in high school. But
of course,
one of the things I thought I would do in those days is when school holidays came, a couple of times I actually took them into work with me for the day.
Okay.
And I just asked couple of different departments like creative or media, would you just, are you happy to have them spend a bit of time? You know, they can do work like filing or whatever, but share about your job and what you do. And they had a great day. We went out and had lunch, you know, but they spent time with other people, got spoilt rotten, but they had a great day and they learned from that. In the Gloria Jean's days, they were getting a bit older, but still at school, I used to take them with me, particularly prior to Christmas, and we were delivering stock in my car every day to stores at Christmas, because we're still trying to work out how much volume stock they needed in the business in the early years. But later on, our older son, he started uni, didn't want to continue because I think he wanted to do uni for the wrong reason, and then he said, I don't really want to do this. So I got him a job as a manager, assistant manager in one of the Gloria Jean stores, absolutely excelled and became passionate about coffee and training as a barista, etc. And over time, the other guys in the company brought him into the business to operationally support stores. Then he became training and drink development, and eventually he and his wife started their own brand and concept up in Newcastle. After 3 years, they sold that for a pretty good price because they built a great business. So, yes, he got involved. Our other son, he wasn't necessarily interested in working in the store. He was more in the technical area, but I got him an introduction to a company that willing to take him on and train him, you know, in that area. And he's excelled. He's in America now, based over there, working on major events like the US Open, the presidential election, the Tony Awards, etc., UN, and so on. So he's learning a phenomenal amount.
Oh, yeah, I bet he is in that company.
So in a way, yes, they were loosely, you bring them into the business. I say to people, be very careful bringing your son and daughter into the business immediately. It's better they go and work somewhere else, under someone else, and then come and work in the business. If they come straight in, I've seen too many, and in a majority of cases, where the son or daughter has actually destroyed the business because they haven't actually learnt the hard knocks. They haven't learnt to stand on their own 2 feet. They think it's a divine right to come in, and they make terrible decisions and they treat people badly because they think, you know, they really de facto own the business.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. It's a real balance, isn't it? I ask these questions because I've got very young kids myself, but I've already started thinking along these lines, and that is that you want to impart the best lessons and the wisdom that you have, I guess, but some of the time that comes out of the trials and tribulations that you go through. So how do you pass that on without that component, if you like, makes it very difficult to make it real? Does that make any sense?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I want to take you back a couple of years. What was your first job?
Well, my first job, I started at 14 years of age in 1963 as a junior in an advertising agency, February 1963.
And did you know at that time that you'd turn out to be a lifetime advertising and marketing guy, or was it just an idea that sounded good at the time?
Well, here's where the reality kicks in, Matt. I was Blacktown High School, western suburb of Sydney. Back in those days, there was Year 9 and Year 11. Year 9 was the school certificate and Year 11 was the leaving certificate. And usually you went on to Year 10 and 11 if you wanted to go to university. And only a few, very small numbers, would do that. It was a lot more difficult to get into uni. So I struggled through school. I was interested more in sport. And I thought school was just a place you had to go to get through before you went out. And I'm not sure what you did. Anyway, I got this junior job. Now, this was paid £3.10 a week. It was before decimal currency, before dollars and cents came in.
Oh, wow, yeah.
£3.10, which probably was about $6.20, roughly.
Yeah, yep.
And I travelled about 50 minutes by train from Blacktown to the city. I got this job as a junior, and I didn't even know advertising agencies existed. It was just a job that came up through Centrelink. And I worked as this junior, which was picking up newspapers every morning and delivering parcels and envelopes to clients and the media offices around the city from Circular Quay, where the office was. And then after a couple of years, someone said, we want to put you in the print production as a junior. Well, starting to learn a little bit about the place, but I was very naive. I mean, I only did, to say I did average at school was probably overstating it. I got through it, but, and because there wasn't ever an expectation by my parents. There's no one talking things like vision, mission, values, plans. That just didn't exist.
And at that time, leaving at that age was a pretty common thing?
Yes, absolutely. Most people left. In my year at Blacktown High, there was 9A right down to 9G. So there were a lot of classes in Year 9, and usually A and some of B would go on to Year 10 and 11. The rest all left and got work elsewhere. It's funny, I was in 9E, and some of the guys in my class became professors and all sorts of stuff, even though they, at that time, never went to uni. They eventually obviously did, and they became, quite significant in the educational of universities and other places. So it doesn't matter where you finish. It's actually, what you really want to do or move forward with. Anyway, so I just progressed through advertising. Eventually, the last 2 years, I became managing director of a company of 200 people in Sydney with big clients like McDonald's. We'd launched McDonald's into Australia, and we had a whole range of other big clients. Scary if you think about it. A guy at 14 knows nothing, suddenly running this big agency, he's supposed to know everything.
And how long how long were you there before you became number one?
Number one, you mean as an ad agency?
No, as in you were head of the company, so you came in at 14, and then how long did it take you to get to the...
Probably about 28 years into it, because I never wanted MD. I never expected to be. I spent many years in print production, and then they moved me into media administration. That's where you plan and buy media, and then I became media planning and buying, eventually became the national media director after many years, then GM of the company, then get to work on McDonald's for a number of years because, I love that retail business, but it wasn't always easy for people to adjust to because they wanted to do nice advertising, corporate advertising, and they wanted to work on those clients. I prefer the down-to-earth stuff where you're getting results. And then eventually the last 2 years, I didn't know I was going to leave and go start Gloria Jeans, but the chairman, I got back from holidays and said, we want you to become managing director. I said, well, I don't think so. It's not on my plan. Not that I had a plan, by the way. It's not on my plan.
Well, that wasn't a lie then, was it? You're actually telling the truth.
Yeah. And anyway, eventually my wife said, you should do it. I go, okay. Well, I went in and I said yes. And then the next day I woke up at 5:30 and thought, don't think about it. You won't get out of bed. So, because what are you doing this? Anyway, on the way to work, it was 90 minutes in the car because the traffic was horrific, bad roads. And I was thinking to myself, well, we're going to set a vision, whatever that is, and I'm going to make people catch us. So we're going to set a plan and a vision. However, because it was still the early years of that stuff being talked about, and no one ever knew the practical reality of really to bring it alive. So we set about on a plan with the key people, went away for a couple of days, set about on a plan, put together this plan, and then said we've got to engage with everyone in the company, the 200 people. If we don't, this is not going to happen. So we worked a process where we did that. And then when I look back the 2 years, each year for the 2 years, the company had a phenomenal success. And I realised we had actually engaged with 200 people. We won every client we pitched for. The company grew, became very profitable. I made sure every staff member got rewarded at bonus time, which never happened before. And that really engaged with a whole lot more people. They actually saw, well, the company is at least thinking of us. And then eventually, mid-1995, our partners approached Sue and I and said, would you like to do something different? And that's where the idea of Gloria Jeans got on the table.
So when you first went at the advertising agency, you came up with this vision, which I guess they didn't have, because if I understand it correctly, the agency was in a little bit of trouble at the time. Clients were leaving, is that right?
Yes, there were through a couple of people in the company and plus takeovers and when something happens, you get a whole multiple of things happening. And so morale was pretty bad and it was going through a difficult process. And so setting in place a different plan, different vision, engaging with people, well, it's all words until the reality starts to come out. And I just made sure, I said to the guys, we're not going to just be words on paper or on a whiteboard. We're going to actually make sure what we've said here we're going to do. So at every board meeting, because they were working directors of running each, and some of them were very young, I promoted into the position. And I said, we're going to make sure every meeting we're going to review where we're at with each of the practical things, actions we've decided we're going to do. So it engaged and made sure people did what they said they would, so they were accountable for it. And just the momentum of seeing a few things happen snowballed and created a whole lot of, I guess we didn't think of it at the time, but a whole lot of positive things started to happen. And even when something negative happened, you just swatted it aside and kept going.
Did you have to have was there like a clean out of staff maybe involved? Because after you come up with that vision to actually share it with that amount of people and to have them get on board and start living it, that would have taken, I mean, I've never done it myself. I'm just imagining that would take a lot of effort.
Well, it does take a lot of effort, but I'm guessing when I looked around, there was about 5 or 6 people out of 200 who thought we were all idiots. And eventually they left because advertising agencies had a procession of people, going for better jobs, bigger jobs, more money. And they left and other people came in and just understood us for where we were at that point. Did every staff really understand everything we were doing? I don't think so. But because they saw us addressing practical things that were hindering the business, because we were encouraging them, empowering them, you drag them on the journey. And I thought at that point, a majority of people engaged to take you forward. But I've learned in the last 12 months that if you get a vision, very practical vision, and you get 3 or 4 people that really believe in it, they can actually take everyone on the journey because other people start to engage with them.
So you don't have to have 100% buy-in?
No, we didn't get 100% buy-in. We started to get more and more buy-in as people thought. When we said we're going to do this and we did it, you get a few more people buy in.
And that's just a practical implementation, whatever it is. We're going to do A, we go and do it. And then that builds that builds some legitimacy into what you're saying at the time, but then for what comes up in the future as well.
Yeah, correct.
So I'm guessing when you got the McDonald's contract, if you like, that would have been a sort of highly contested account to get. Were you in charge of the agency when you landed that account?
Oh, no. I was a junior.
Oh, okay, so they were there for quite a while.
Yeah, and I remember wondering what the MD, managing director, when he announced we'd picked up this McDonald's, never heard of it before. We'd knocked back KFC to take on McDonald's. I thought, what is it? I'm just young. And then, fortunately, I didn't have any idea what I was talking about, and he did. It was many years to get going, but I'd done a little bit of work as a junior on it, some media planning, small budget, and then over the years got actively involved in it from a media point of view and then account management point of view, and then ran the whole account while we were looking for someone, because we had a team of 50 people on McDonald's because it was a huge piece of business.
Yes.
And and sometimes with the marketing director it was difficult at times. I got on well with him, but others didn't. So whenever we had to move someone, it took time to find the right person. So I had to get back involved in it. I liked the business. I liked the cut and thrust of it. But there were certain, always parts of it that were difficult. But that's the same with every client. Same with every business. There's always issues and things you prefer not to have to deal with.
Of course. Was there a moment when you really felt that you cracked the market in terms of having McDonald's accepted? Was there a moment in your advertising campaign that really worked?
Well, it was actually a culmination of a whole lot of plans, programs, premiums, products, strategies that started to work and build on top of each other. And we got to the stage, certainly in Sydney and Melbourne, where McDonald's became number one or very strong, still struggled to some extent in Queensland and very badly in South Australia and WA, where Hungry Jack's was more entrenched. And it was the days when Pizza Hut and KFC was quite strong, or particularly Pizza Hut, who seemed to have lost the way through a whole range of different reasons. And we still struggled. And, the words would be, Hungry Jack's are so big in these markets. And over time, we suddenly discovered that Hungry Jack's wasn't as big as everyone thought. And even though the sales volume per week McDonald's were delivering, stores were delivering, was not sufficient to be sustainable, we started to develop some fairly aggressive strategies in those markets to grow it. And it probably took 15 years.
Oh, wow.
To really know you've made it in those markets. And then from then it was like a tipping point or a catapult that actually they just went from strength to strength in those markets.
Were you approached when you were still working with that marketing company to be part of Gloria Jeans, or how did that transition come about?
Well, in mid-1995, a friend and his wife approached Sue and I and said, would you like to do something different? I said, well, what do you got in mind? And he said, I've been offered this concept called Gloria Jeans. I said, well, I don't know a lot about fashion, because that's what I thought it was. And he said, no, it's coffee. I said, well, I picked up a coffee. I don't know why it's bitter or burnt or tastes like dirt one day, and other days it's okay. I do now, but I didn't then. So he showed us this colour brochure. He said, I've been offered this concept. He was already bringing in, the owners of the company had Brothers Coffee, but he was already bringing in coffee beans for supermarkets and coffee and other condiment type things for restaurants and so on. And he said, I'm busy with this. I need someone to run this if we were to do it. So he and I went to America, looked at it and negotiated the rights for Australia, despite me having no idea what a specialty coffee concept was or anything about the coffee business. But we negotiated this deal. They wanted 75 stores. I couldn't see how you could open 75, which was then a coffee tea gift store in America. In Australia, we convinced them on 25 in a 10-year term. Even that seemed ambitious. But we came back and we had agreement to open 2 stores, and we got going, struggled for a long time. There was a whole lot of adjustments, a whole lot of things we had to do. I mean, the Americans were no help, as they usually aren't with any business, because they just don't understand the international market outside the east and west coast of America. And so they're not that much help. So you really got to take this and actually turn it into what it's actually designed to be, which is what we did with Gloria Jeans, and started to slowly get traction. But it took some time. There was a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of research, not physical research, but looking at what is the specialty coffee market that you see today. And that really, over time, and it wasn't immediately, but over many years, turned the market, on its head. And that's why you see a big coffee market today, which is probably way oversaturated.
There's a coffee shop on every...
Well, everyone has this passion, not everyone, but the majority of people have this passion to open their own coffee place, but they don't understand the nuances of it, and they just think you just open, get any brand, stick it in there, turn a machine on, start producing coffee, but that's not what the market is. It's not hard, but you've got to have an understanding of it. It's a culture.
So what was happening around this time? And the reason I ask is that you, in advertising, you've got a great job, a great career. It's been very successful up until that point. And then to hear about an idea, negotiate what turned out to be the 25 stores, and then come back and jump into it. That kind of seems like a big jump at that time. Was there anything else happening then that sort of caused you to take the plunge, or anything that could you see the vision for coffee? What was it? It just seems like a big jump.
Yeah, well, no, I couldn't see a vision for coffee necessarily. I liked the cup of coffee. I liked the concept when I saw it, but understanding whether it's a goer or a durable in a market like Australia, I've been 30 years in advertising, and I'm looking around and thinking, there's not a lot of older people here. This is a full-on, in the day is the time you start in the morning when you wake up to when you go to bed. It's full on. It's go, go, go. Everything's urgent, but you only deal with the panic things because everything's urgent. Everyone has this mentality, everything is urgent, and it isn't, but that's how it operates as an industry. So you thought, well, you could build something that you could work with till the rest of your life. Although these days that doesn't necessarily happen. You build it up, other people want to buy it, or you decide you don't want to do this for the rest of your life. There's too many other issues, government legislation changes, interference, just a whole lot of other things says, well, do I want to do this for the rest of my life and have my neck on the line? But, back then in advertising, I was 49 when our friends approached us about it. In 1995, I was 49 at the time. And thought, well, do I do something different? And I'd always sensed for a couple of years, I'd said to my wife, I think God's got a different plan for us sometime. I don't know what it is. We can talk about it when the time comes. Well, that was the time when someone came to us. Do we look at this? We both decided, yes, it sounds like a good idea. So we made the decision. So I gave up the income and the big bonuses, and then started putting money in a business, that the money started to disappear, as you know.
Yes, well, building a business is very easy, irrespective of the bank account, isn't it? But when you have to account for that...
It keeps going down, and I say to some people, they go, I'm going to start a business. They hadn't thought about it properly. I'm going to give up my job. I said, well, don't give up the job yet. Make sure you've got this thing going first and you've got it together, because once the money stops, it starts going out, even in trickles, but it keeps going down.
So you came home from the US, you landed, you left the advertising agency. What did you do next? Because I'm guessing that there's this moment where the two of you are sitting in an office in a room or whatever with a commitment to open 25 stores, but you haven't actually got anything else done. Where did you go from there? Was it recruitment? Was it finding sites?
No, I got back. We'd made the decision, negotiated the deal. We still had all the paperwork, which took nearly 6 months to finalise. Because a lot of their stuff contravened laws in Australia. We had to get them to change it. Americans don't understand about paperwork has to change. in the business process, franchising and so on. But I went back. I had to give 3 months' notice. So I waited. It was early August in America. When I got back, it was about September. I resigned, which meant I could leave by Christmas, which gave us a chance to get plans, start getting stuff together, finalise the documents, start getting designs for stores. So we finally opened the first store mid-November 1996. So we just, I had fairly big payout because I'd been there a long time. You know, I had long service leave, but I also had a payout agreement as part of my contract, which gave me at least some good money, could live on, plus also could loan to the business to get started as we needed to. So there wasn't any office, I guess, until about the next year, 1996. I just used an office or a bedroom at home as an office, and my partner had his other business, so he had a roasting plant and offices there, so he was okay from that point of view.
And then was the first goal or objective to open the first store?
Yeah, yes. Well, we actually, along the process, got an agreement to open 2 stores, one at Miranda in south of Sydney and the other at Pagewood East Gardens, not far from the Sydney airport. And they were about 2 weeks apart in opening.
So it was a pretty, even by the standards that you eventually rose to in terms of the amount of stores that you had open, there was a pretty aggressive start, wasn't it, really? I mean, a couple of stores at once.
Well, not really. I mean, they struggled because we're still getting to understand the concept, and it was new to Australia. We were totally re-educating the whole market as we went. You know, people opposed a lot of the things we did because there was a tradition to drinking coffee and tea that you had to break through. And, you know, all the money we had went into that, so there wasn't much left until we thought, well, we had a hybrid of specialty coffee takeaway to a lot of merchandise, which, you know, you have a novelty hand-painted teapot. You don't sell a lot of them, and when someone buys one, if they're the only one interested, they're not going to buy another one of them unless it's different. So, and the margins are terrible on it, so you're not going to make much of a business. So we had to continually work at the model to get it right before we even considered a third store. And it wasn't till about 2 years into the business that we looked at then a second and third stores, because I had some ex-McDonald's people that I knew that came to me and said, you know, we'd like to get one of these franchises, and they were willing to work with us to build the business. So we had people, even though they put money into it in terms of buying a franchise in the store, were willing to work to us to build the business. They knew we didn't have it quite there. The product was great. Everything was good, great, but the financial viability wasn't there at that time.
And how long did it take before it really started to turn around from a financial point of view?
Oh, well, I guess it was quite a few years, because you're constantly investing in the business, because as you start to grow, you then got to put another person on. You might open a company store where you've got to be able to fit that out.
Right.
And you've got to run that, because even though the first 2 stores were company stores, a guy who had a men's shop came along and really pestered us after about 12 months wanting to get Miranda. He said, no, I understand, you know, you still got to do things, but I love this business. I want to be in it. So he rang us so many times, we decided, well, he obviously must be passionate. So he did. And the 2 managers of the East Garden store got together, and her mother funded them into it, and they took over that store, which brought some more cash flow into the business. And then we opened, we're going to open another one, but then the brother and sister-in-law of one of the partners in Miranda, they wanted to get one, so they took the next 2 stores. So it was a few years before we got another company store, because every time we got a site, we had someone I knew come along and said, oh, I'll take that one.
Oh, and that worked well to fund the expansion.
Yeah, it's not the ideal way. Everyone, you know, building a business, or particularly franchise business, will say, oh, you've got to have all this stuff in place, you've got to do all these things or whatever. And I go, yeah, that's all terrific, but it's not reality. You've really got to run the business on the smell of an oily rag. in the early days, and you've got to put a lot of time and effort in yourself until you're at the point you can bring in support or whatever resources you need. It slowly grows to it gets to that point where you can invest a bit more in it. I know in some cases people get investors and they bring in a whole lot of money up front and they do it all up front. But sometimes they don't ever get the business right because they've relied on the cash and they're not forced to do the things right they need to do right.
So it's almost like if you can have the business work with very little money, then by rights it will also work when you have a lot.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess that's a bit theoretical, but it actually worked in practice in that case. And, we probably did. I learned a lot. I did things that I never thought I'd be doing, like leasing, finding sites, leasing, recruiting franchisees, getting designs and fit outs done. Well, the interesting thing is as you grow, other people come on and they tell you can't do this. You could say, well, you can because we did it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Well, you get a shop fitter saying, oh, well, this is the cost per square metre. I go, no, it's not. We've already done it for less than that. And they're just trying to, get a premium.
Changing tracks just a little bit for a second. I've heard you talk a lot about having the right people, which seems like you attracted, maybe had the knack for attracting very early on the right people. And I was talking to a business owner just in the last couple of days who's having issues in one section of their business, particularly where they've got to sort some things out. How do you actually find the right people? Does it go back to that having a strong enough vision to plug them into? Because it seems very, you just said my comment before was theoretical. Like it is kind of theoretical to say get the right people. Like I don't think any business owner goes out to intentionally find the wrong people, but then we sometimes end up with people working with people or people in our organisations or businesses that maybe we can call challenging. So how do you find and then keep the right people?
Well, here's a few things that I've learned, and I've made a lot of mistakes. You're right. I don't think anyone deliberately goes out and says, I want to get someone who's going to steal from me, who's going to cheat, not turn up. But we seem to end up with them. And
it's a big question, I know. So feel free to take it where you want to go.
In the early days, we hired a couple of people we could afford. They sort of knew their job, but they got what I call a ceiling mentality. There was a certain level they could operate in, but they couldn't break out of that.
Right.
And they needed to be able to grow. They needed to be able to think. Needed to be able to provide. If you take the financial area particularly, you needed input from the finances, not just someone who counted, the dollars coming in and the costs. You needed, hey, do you understand, that our labour in this store is too much? You need what I call commercial input to help you. And I've made a lot of mistakes in that area. The other thing is people look at resumes and put too much credence on them. And particularly these days, it's very easy to have a resume that sounds good because you go to the internet and you can get templates to help you. But, if the only references are family members and good friends, I don't think that's a good guide. And I look for people and what they've done. But then I say to people, what you need to do up front is share with them your business, what it's about, your expectation of how customers are treated, how you treat each staff members, and have a look at them and see are they engaging with that, or are their eyes or they're rolling their eyes. If they're rolling their eyes, you know that they don't believe any of this stuff, and they're going to be a problem for you. The other thing is so often in business, and I've done it myself, you're so pushed for work that you'll take anyone that comes along who sounds good. And I usually refer to it as someone with a pulse.
Yeah, anyone.
And look, anyone can do anything, but people have a lot of attitudes and mindsets about they don't want to do certain things, or they're not going to do it, or they think that you're going to solve all their personal problems and give them all the time off they need because they've got so many personal problems. You're going to keep loaning them money because they spend their wage, or they've already spent it before they get it. And they're always borrowing. I had them in advertising all the time. The same people would go around trying to borrow money from different people as soon as payday had come because they'd already have to pay off all the money they borrowed from everyone else before. And if they're doing that, they're more worried about those things than they're worried about their clients or the business or the job they've got to do. So you need to have people who will get on with the job when you're not there. And even as a tradesperson, you've got to go to another job to quote or whatever. You need to have your people there doing the job. You don't want to, sneak back and find them sitting down having a smoko or doing nothing or half doing the job.
True.
Just to get it done. Because, if they can do the job and they do it properly, they're actually going to make your business, more profitable, but make your life a little bit easier rather than creating stress. So, I always say share with where you want to go with the business, what you've got in mind for it, and just have a look how they engage with that.
And do you also ask about, when you're doing a lot of this, their background, what their interests are? Do you try and form a good idea of who they are as a person? Yes,
look, these days with all the rules and laws and stuff about what you can and can't ask, I always, at some point, even after the interview, say, what's your interest? And you can usually do that in the interview. And in advertising days, if their whole interest was around clubbing and snow skiing, I never hired them. Nothing I got against skiing. It's just that in this winter season, they'd be gone. They want to go on Friday early. They tell you they'd be back in Monday morning. They usually rang up, they're so knackered because they have this, they only get one part of one night's sleep because they go down by bus and they get one night down there, which they don't get a bit early anyway, and they're back Monday, or late Sunday night, they're so knackered they're not into Tuesday and they're already ready for the next one. If it's clubbing, they turn up the next day like they've been in a rugby scrum. It's just, nothing against any of it, but it was the few people that did that, you got nothing out of them. And they were highly paid people, and you get clients complaining. So from an advertising point of view, I used to look at those things. But I think there's some good guides there. If you're looking for someone to help you as an electrician and a plumber or any type of trade or in business, and their interest, you've got to be careful what interests they've got. Nothing wrong with them, but sometimes that interest dominates them. And particularly if they say they're really passionate about blogging and social media, it's because at work, so much time is taken up by people doing personal stuff like that, that you've either got to factor it in, you're not going to get 100% from them, and are you willing to wear that?
So you really want to ensure that the opportunity that you're providing in terms of a job or a role is somewhat in line with what they actually truly want to be doing. Yeah, correct. If it's just a job to get money to do all the other things, they're not going to sow into the business. They're not going to look after clients. Close enough is good enough. The drift you end up with. Yeah, no, I understand that mentality that you do as little as you can to get your paycheck and then get out of there.
Yeah.
Now, at the peak of Gloria Jeans, how many stores did you have?
Well, at the peak in Australia, we were getting up close to the 500 because we had to close about 25, 26 stores when Borders Books closed.
Oh, were you part of their...
Well, we did a deal with them whereby we would open or take over their cafes in every stores. And it was a good model that worked for them and us and franchisees. So most franchisees would say, well, tough luck to franchisees, but we made the decision because of the way we operated, we would help those franchisees move to another location and not charge them for it. A few decided they didn't want to do it anymore and they just, they packed up. I'm never sure why that's a good decision because you move to another one, you always got something you can sell at least, even if you don't stay with it very long. So we helped them do all that. But, a company like that closing, there's nothing you can do. So you lose a few stores. And there's always movement in the market because landlords, particularly in shopping centres, get very greedy after a lease renewal. And they seem to think the business can cope with a double increase in rent. And they're always looking to maximise their yield. They don't seem to care about whether retailers and shop owners ever have an existence or not. And it's a bad problem which still exists today. But so there's always a move. And then when we bought the International off the Americans in 2002, there was about 15 countries. Well, we expanded to about 39 countries. So there was up close at one stage to 1,000 stores in the world.
So you owned, if I understand this correctly, you owned the Gloria Jeans brand.
Well, yes, in 2002 we bought the rights. We were only trying to get Australia and New Zealand outright just to protect our investment, if you like, because we had a 10-year term, and as much as they probably wouldn't have, they could easily not renew it, sell it to someone else.
And you could lose your business overnight.
Yeah, correct. And as much as that's always a fear, it was unlikely that would happen. But the other problem is, as you get, say, 8 years into your term, it's hard to get franchisees for a term longer than the 2 years, because their lawyers are saying, well, these guys only have the rights, for 10 years, and they're already 8 years gone. So you've got no surety.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And that's creating a bit of fear that really doesn't exist, because even if someone else bought it, they would still want those people. But anyway, lawyers are lawyers, and they've got to do that. They have to, do that. But I think the overemphasis is on some of that stuff. So it was better for us to have a firm fixed either ownership or renewal. And out of that came the opportunity to buy the brand for the world. We didn't buy America because they wanted too much for something that was struggling. So we didn't have the money. We had to convince a bank to loan us the money, a lot of money. That happened through an extensive business plan we had to put together, both for Australia and international. It's a constant learning process, as you can see. As you're growing something, there's always something new you've got to do, something new you've got to learn, or you've got to get people involved with to help you. It just doesn't fall out of the sky and it's all okay. And it then came with its problems, owning these 15 countries, because most of them were struggling, and they didn't want, as much as they didn't see the Americans helping, they were angry that the Americans would sell it to someone else. And especially as the Americans announced it to them in an email, didn't even ring them.
Oh, goodness. So you were the bad guy before you even landed.
Correctly. So we made the decision. We rang them all. Didn't go very well, but we invited them all to Australia for an international day at the Australian franchisee's second franchisee conference, have an international day. We didn't think many would come. They all came, sat in the bar for the whole time of the Australian conference, or most of it, and fueled themselves with each other and alcohol. And the word coming to us is they were going to tear us apart on the International Day. So the International Day comes when everyone else is leaving. We sit around this big boardroom, and before they could say anything, we said, welcome, today's a new day. The vision for Australia will now become the vision for the world. All stores will be designed here. All the drinks menu will be the same. The ingredients will be the same. We're going to supply all these ingredients. You're coming to Australia to be totally retrained. If you don't like it, there's the door. Well, no one left the room, but the Japanese stood up, but they sat down again. And, I say to people that from that point on, we didn't Band-Aid over a problem. We said, today's a new day. We're going to fix this. It starts today. So if something's not working, you've got to say, we've got to make a change.
So you went right back to the power of a vision. You laid the vision out.
Yeah.
And you asked them directly, are you in or are you out?
Yeah.
And then started working through it. So that's a bit of a theme, I guess, of your career, forming that vision, but then secondly having them, your employees or different countries or different franchisees, then buy into it.
Yes, correct. But that then had to be outworked into buying into it. But they knew that they were different focus, and do you want to be part of it?
So you're no longer with Gloria Jeans, is that right?
Yeah, we sold out. Both families sold out back in late 2014.
And was there a reason that you did that?
Oh, yes. I mean, my wife and I were out of the day-to-day. She was working in the marketing area as well, but we're out of the day-to-day, and I was just speaking a lot then, and I was only going for board meetings, and you probably needed to be there day-to-day because things start to happen that you're not happy with. Might be attitudes, different directions. So when the opportunity came, I said, yeah, happy to sell, happy to get out totally. because I was already busy with other things, so I could go on a different journey and not have all that issue with our money tied up. Can't get access to it because it's a thirsty machine.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
So it's better to get out and do other things. I mean, this year I turned 70 and I'm busier than I've ever been doing what I'm doing. I mean, I don't see sitting around doing nothing. We're not sort of those sort of, we like to be active doing things and helping people and passing on all the things that I've learned is really helpful to people.
Now, you consult to a lot of businesses now, and that makes perfect sense given what you've been able to achieve. What do businesses most commonly come to you and ask? Is there a theme to it?
Yeah, look, there generally is a theme. I want to start a new business, or I want to grow my business. I've stalled. I'm not attracting new clients. I can't collect money. I'm not getting enough margin. So often the key questions, there's always a spread, but there is a few key ones. And one is, how do I balance family and work life? How do I marketing? How do I do marketing? How do I do digital marketing with that? Or what role does that play? Thirdly, how do I've got no systems. My business is growing. How do I go about getting systems? And thirdly, how do I get the right people, or how do I get rid of people? Are probably the four categories most fall into. And
do you tackle that in a certain order or advise in a certain order? Does one lead to the other, or is it a holistic approach?
Yeah, what I've learned is I take them back. A few other people approach me. They just want to be mentored to become a leader in their business, whatever is a different thing. And some of those things do come out actually in the process. But no, what I usually go is, okay, tell me what your vision is. So first thing I say, where do you want to be in 3 years? Oh, I just want to be bigger. And I go, well, how big? Because I just want to be bigger is nothing to shoot at. And if I'm doing $500,000, I want to do $1 million. I'm doing 100,000, I want to do $500,000. I've got 3 stores, I want 15. I want them to be specific. Then I ask them, what are the barriers to achieving that? Could be financial. It could be I can't get the right people. I can't keep people. I've got no profitability in the business. You're starting to work out some points for the action sheet. No profitability. Maybe we're not charging enough. Can't charge any more. Well, actually, it's not true. I've had people I've asked to put the prices up. They've done that, and their business started to flourish, and they've actually attracted a better clientele who actually pay them on time, which is even better.
It does help, doesn't it?
In some cases, I refer them to Jordan, who you met, is a web marketing guy, to specifically target groups to build their business. There's a bit of work's got to be done first, but usually most people say you've got to have a new website. Well, actually, it's not true. There's other ways to do it. So it just depends what it is. But I take them to where do you want to be, what are the barriers, and then we work on, have you got a vision? If not, let's create one that thinks about it from your customer's point of view, not you. Work up some values of the business so your staff know, or they know the expectation from you of the business to treating others in the business, people outside, customers, non-customers, and so on. And then I can do a SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
I do, yep.
And I focus and I say, take your sheet, the strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, find a couple of business people who know you really well, and your wife or your husband or someone close to you that knows you really well, and get them to fill in this after you've done it, because they find there's a whole lot more strengths they've got than they think they've got. And the weaknesses, I don't want you to focus too much on unless there's a weakness that needs addressing and it can be addressed. And then the opportunities, sometimes these people come up with opportunities for your business you haven't even thought of because they're not encumbered with traditional thinking in your product category. That's why people like what I do, because I come in not really understanding their business, and I can actually throw everything up in the air and say, you're doing this, but you're getting the same result, which is nothing. Why do you keep doing it? We need to change this. We need to adjust it. We need to do whatever, because I'm not coming in with traditional, like I help a guy in the travel industry. I'm not coming with traditional travel thinking.
Of course, yeah. So it's an entirely new perspective.
Yeah, if it's the building industry, I come in and I know a little bit, but I don't know it. I'm not encumbered with all the traditional ways of doing things. I'm helping an interior designer, a friend of ours, and I'm giving her thinking she hasn't even thought about. And simple things like, well, you've done these quotes, she thinks she's too expensive. I said, well, you ever followed them up? So she rang them up and they said, yeah, no, we're ready to go ahead. No one even mentioned the price, but in her mind, she's running around thinking she hasn't got an answer because maybe she's too expensive.
Oh, okay.
So it's the practical things of saying, have you thought of doing this?
Trying a few things. So there's nothing, a lot of the time, it's not revolutionary. It's just little adjustments here and there.
Yeah, not revolutionary. And sometimes I come out with ideas for them that for them it's revolutionary, but I've probably done myself for a client in Abbott because I've worked across government, finance, legal, building products, personal care products, retail, franchises, everything you can think of I've worked on at some point. Civil engineering guy I know, I've helped, even web marketing guys I know not a lot about, I've helped them because they need focus in the right areas. They all get bogged down in their own business.
Who has been the biggest help or influence to you in your career?
There's probably been a few people on the journey where I've got encouragement, input, teaching, if you like, input in that way. I mean, first was in advertising. I had an MD, who really believed in me, even though I didn't know anything. And I really honoured that and felt that I've got to help other people because he took the time to help me. A lot of stuff from John Maxwell, because his stuff is very practical, has helped me. When at about 24 years ago, 23, 24, we changed churches and started going to Hillsong Church, and he was a church that actually encouraged business people. And through the messages, I got a lot of stuff that really helped me in running an ad agency and then Gloria Jeans in terms of building a culture, managing people, dealing with difficult people. I got a lot of practical stuff that came out of those messages on Sunday and out of the Bible that I didn't even know was there. That stuff became a big help to me.
Just a couple of last questions, Peter, and then we'll wrap up because I know that you've got to get off and do probably a few much more important things in this interview. But anyway, the next 5 years, what does that hold for you?
Well, I would have thought everyone would lose interest in me after, selling Gloria Jeans. In fact, if it's gone the other way, it's accelerated in the sense the amount of speaking overseas, even in third world countries, in Australia is just accelerated. A lot of inquiries about mentoring or business consulting. I physically can't do it all, so I've set up a live online webinar or whatever you want to call it, where I'm being able to help 6 or 7 people at any one time, whereas I couldn't do them individually. And so that's the first one of those starts actually today. So I know how to do it because I've done sort of workshops live with people anyway previously, and I've got the content to practically be able to help people. So we move it away from just motivational stuff, but actually practically working on their business and solving issues they've got even, day to day. And then we put out some resources, a couple of books and a USB with talks and mini workbooks on it because it can't physically be everywhere. So we're trying to develop more of that. I've just discovered that you can have your own YouTube channel.
Oh, wow.
And so we're looking, I can put a whole lot of stuff up there, short videos to really help business people. So it's really trying to replicate everything and make it available on a wider scale that's not expensive. Well, the YouTube channel won't be any cost, but the resources I put out aren't that expensive for the amount of content and help that people get, because I'm trying to just help people because other people took the time to help me.
And where do people find this information? I know your website is probably one of them, would that be right?
Well, my website, peterirvine.com, has a few resources on there, has the 2 books I put out, which are actually just practical books with lots of stories, lots of examples. And also there's a collection, USB collection, which has 5 audio talks, 2 video talks, and 4 mini workbooks, one on marketing, just some simple things to learn about marketing with a 1-page template, 8 questions to get clear in your head before you get any marketing done, whether it's a sign, a website, a landing page, or a leaflet, and another one on building an actionable plan. How do you build an actionable plan to start or grow your business? Has the templates, gives you ideas of how to do that and make that happen. And it's all simple stuff on a USB on my website, and there's a couple of other mini workbooks on there. They're all about 12 or 14 pages, the mini workbook. So there's a fair bit of content there to help people, and the website's got some articles, short articles under the word called articles. Is actually about 52 weeks of practical stuff to help business people.
So it's peterirvine.com. There's plenty there if you want to look at it.
Yeah. If someone wants to put a more than one resource, it's better to email the email address on there, because postage is included in each item individually, and it won't be that expensive if people order more than once, because the postage will come down.
Well, there you go. Bulk discount. Now, the question I ask everyone, and then I'll let you go. If you could have one law changed, what would it be?
One law. Well, some of the laws that have been introduced have probably been needed to create credibility in the franchising industry, for example, and food. If one law changed, it'd be good if they got rid of a lot of them and made it more complex to do stuff. Just trying to think what would we actually get rid of. That's
actually come up a few times, actually. Maybe a little bit of deregulation would make things a lot easier.
Well, it is. I mean, every time they try to do something to protect a small minority group or one person, they create so many laws and paperwork around it. It actually costs that person a lot more in their own legal costs. So it ceased to achieve what it's want. I just think if one law could be changed, is actually a law that eliminates lawyers having to be involved in everything we do.
Fair enough. Is there any, I think a lot of people, by the way, would probably agree with that. But anyway, are there any other parting words you'd have, any advice that you'd want to leave business owners with that they can take away with before we finish?
Yeah, don't live a life of regret. You don't want to say later in life or on your deathbed, I wish I tried that. So many business people won't launch a product or a service or start a business or move away from what they're doing into something they're really passionate about. The key thing is to look for what are you really passionate about, so it's not just a job you're doing, and don't live with regret that you didn't at least start the journey looking at that. And there's so much information today. You can go on the internet. Yes, there's a lot of crap on there, but there's also good stuff. Talk to people, get information, read, invest in yourself, and then use that to formulate where you want to go and what you want to do in the future.
Well, Peter, I'm going to let you get back to your day. And once again, thank you so much for carving out a little bit of time for me and for doing this, and for everyone listening. It's been a blast, and hope to we hadn't seen each other for a few years, but we caught up recently, and hope that you venture to Melbourne again sometime soon.
Thank you, Matt. Great talking.
Hey everybody, it's Matt again. Thanks for listening. Just a couple of things before you guys clock off. You can get all Trench Talk episodes at xrm.com.au/podcast. You can also sign up for other goodies at the same site. Just plonk your email in there and you are covered. That's X for X-ray, R for Romeo, M for Mike.com.au/podcast. If you really like what I'm bringing you, please head to iTunes, subscribe to this show and leave a review right there. And lastly, if you want to contact me directly, type the @ symbol followed by Mr. Matt Reynolds into your search bar and you'll find all the social links. Goodbye.